It started with the sound of water, a soft rhythmic splashing from the upstairs bathroom that cut through the evening's oppressive silence. The house felt cavernous without my husband Mark, his absence a hollow space that amplified every creak and groan of the old structure. He was away on business, a familiar state of affairs that usually left me in a state of quiet contentment. But not tonight. Tonight the silence felt less like peace and more like a hell breath. My stepson Liam was home. His beat-up sedan, a relic from his high school days, was parked neatly in the driveway, a sign of the meticulous man he was trying to become. At 18 he was caught in that strange hazy limbo between boyhood and manhood. Home from his first year of college, he carried himself with a new tentative confidence, but there was still a shadow of uncertainty in his eyes, a vulnerability he tried so hard to conceal. I set my purse on the entryway table, the click of the clasp unnaturally loud in the quiet. After slipping off my heels, I padded into the kitchen, the cool tile, a welcome shock against the soles of my feet. I poured a glass of water, the simple act, a brief anchor in the shifting atmosphere of the house. I had expected a perfectly ordinary evening, just me, Liam, and the familiar comfort of our home. But something felt different. A low electric hum seemed to hang in the air, a sense of anticipation I couldn't shake. I told myself it was nothing, just the fatigue of a long week. Ascending the stairs, the sound of running water grew louder, more distinct. The door to the main bathroom was ajar, a sliver of warm yellow light spilling into the dimly lit hallway. That was unusual. Liam, like his father, was a stickler for privacy. A closed door was a sacred boundary. An open one was practically an invitation. My curiosity, a treacherous and persistent thing, got the better of me. I slowed my steps, my breath catching in my throat, as I leaned in for what I told myself would be an innocent glance. But what I saw through that narrow aperture made my feet root to the floor. Liam stood with his back to me, his torso bare. The soft light from the vanity traced the lean muscles of his shoulders and back, still boyish but hinting at the strength to come. His shoulders were slumped, his head bowed over the sink as his hands moved with a frantic, focused energy. He seemed to be washing something, an object I couldn't quite make out. His jeans hung low on his hips, an effortless casualness that was so unlike the carefully put-together young man I knew. A strange heat bloomed in my chest, a confusing mix of maternal concern and something else, something darker and more primal. I stood there for a heartbeat too long. My mind raced through the options: not call out his name or simply pull the door closed and grant him the privacy he had so uncharacteristically forgotten. But I did none of those things. As I shifted my weight, the old floorboards betrayed me with a soft groan. Liam's head snapped up. He spun around, his eyes wide with a raw, cornered panic. "Alara," he stammered, his hands fumbling for a towel on the counter. I didn't know you were home." His voice trembled, and the composure he usually wore like armor had shattered. He clutched the towel in front of him, a flimsy shield against my gaze. "I didn't mean to interrupt," I said, my voice coming out breathy and thin. I forced my eyes away, feeling a hot blush creep up my neck. I just heard the water and I thought maybe something was wrong. His face was a deep shade of crimson as he stared at the floor, his knuckles white where he gripped the towel. "No, it's nothing." But the tremor in his voice told a different story. The lie hung between us, thick and suffocating in the steam-filled room. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the way he refused to meet my eyes, in the defeated slump of his shoulders, as if he were carrying an invisible, crushing weight. A part of me, the sensible, rational part, screamed to walk away, to close the door and pretend this moment never happened. But a stronger, more insistent voice urged me forward. I saw a crack in his armor, and I felt a dangerous, undeniable pull to see what lay beneath. "Liam," I said softly, my hand pushing the door open wider as I stepped inside. The latch clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing with a terrifying finality. We were enclosed now in this small, intimate space, the world sealed out. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. I promise there's no judgment here." His grip on the towel tightened, then loosened. For a long moment, the only sound was the drip of the faucet, each drop landing like a tiny hammer blow against the silence. I thought he would shut down, retreat back into himself. But then he let out a shuddering breath and sagged onto the closed lid of the toilet, burying his face in his hands. It's embarrassing," he confessed, his voice muffled by his palms. I leaned against the counter, deliberately creating a sense of casual ease to soothe his frayed nerves. "You don't have to say anything you're not comfortable with," I murmured. "But sometimes just talking about it helps." He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glossy with unshed tears. "I've been dealing with something. A problem. I didn't know who to talk to." His vulnerability was disarming. The guarded, self-sufficient Liam I knew had vanished, replaced by a scared young man who was utterly lost. That he would choose to confide in me, his stepmother, with whom he shared a pleasant but distant relationship, felt significant. It felt powerful. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle, encouraging. He hesitated, his hand moving to rub the back of his neck. "It's about my body," he finally managed. "Something just feels wrong. I don't know if it's something I should be worried about, or if I'm just overthinking everything." The words tumbled out in a rush as if a dam had broken. A wave of something that felt like compassion washed over me. It must have taken every ounce of his courage just to say that much. "You're not alone in feeling that way," I said, choosing my words with care. "Everyone has questions like that at some point. It's brave of you to pay attention to your health and even braver to talk about it." I paused, letting the words settle. "Do you want me to help you figure it out?" He looked at me, his expression a tangled mess of relief and apprehension. I wouldn't want to be a bother." "Never," I replied, offering what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out." Together, as we talked, the initial awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a strange and potent intimacy. Logan spoke in fragmented sentences, describing his anxieties in vague, uncertain terms. His voice quavered with the weight of how long he'd been holding this fear inside him. He couldn't talk to his father about it. Their relationship was built on a foundation of sports and academics, not intimate vulnerabilities. The unspoken truth hung in the air. Mark wouldn't know how to handle this. "I just don't know if it's normal?" Liam whispered, his gaze fixed on the frayed edge of the towel. "There's no manual for this stuff." "There's nothing wrong with you, Liam," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "You're just figuring things out. Nobody has all the answers, especially not at your age." He finally met my gaze, his eyes searching mine for confirmation. And in that moment, I realized the full extent of my power. He was looking to me for guidance, for absolution. It was a heavy responsibility, but it was also intoxicating. "Let me help," I said again, my voice a low murmur. I moved closer, the small space of the bathroom shrinking until the air between us felt charged electric. "Show me what's worrying you." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his entire body tense. Then with a deep shuddering sigh, he gave a slight nod. A surrender. He slowly lowered the towel, his eyes never leaving mine. What followed was a slow, deliberate dance of discovery. My initial clinical detachment, the one I had manufactured to make this acceptable, quickly dissolved in the humid air. I told myself I was helping, that this was a necessary maternal act. But as my fingers brushed against his skin, a jolt sharp and undeniable shot through me. I guided him through a self-examination, my voice, a calm, steady presence in the charged silence. But my thoughts were anything but calm. I was acutely aware of the heat radiating from his body, the faint scent of soap and clean sweat, the way his breath hitched every time my hand moved. My touch, which began as a clinical necessity, started to linger. I found myself tracing patterns on his skin, my movements becoming a slow, hypnotic rhythm that was both a comfort and a fever. His initial anxiety melted into a dazed, pliant state. I could feel the tension leaving his body, replaced by something else, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated between us. I wasn't just assuaging his fears anymore. I was stoking a different kind of fire. I was in complete control, and the realization was dizzying. I had cracked open a space inside him, a place of fragile trust and raw vulnerability, and stepped inside. Hours seemed to melt away in that steam-filled sanctuary. The conversation faded, the words replaced by the unspoken language of touch and breath. When it was over, a profound quiet settled in the room. Liam leaned back against the cool tile of the wall, his eyes closed, a look of serene exhaustion on his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I never thought I'd be able to talk to anyone about that." I smiled, my hand gently squeezing his shoulder. "I'm glad you did, and you know you can always come to me right about anything." He nodded, his eyes shining. As I finally stood to leave, a strange cocktail of emotions churned inside me. Relief that he had trusted me. Guilt for the line I had so willingly and deliberately crossed. And a terrifying, exhilarating sense of anticipation. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not the end. It was the beginning. The days that followed were draped in a fragile, unspoken tension. On the surface, things returned to a semblance of normal. Mark came home, filling the house with his booming voice. An easy laughter, blissfully unaware of the secret that now lived within its walls. But underneath the facade of domesticity, something had fundamentally shifted. A new gravity existed between me and Liam. A silent, powerful current that pulled us into a shared orbit. He was more withdrawn, but in a different way than before. It wasn't a wall of defense. It was a space of contemplation. I'd catch him staring at me from across the dinner table, a question in his eyes, only for him to look away the moment I met his gaze, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. The unspoken thing between us grew festering in the quiet moments. It was there in the way we'd accidentally brush hands in the hallway, sending a jolt through us both. It was there in the long, loaded silences that fell whenever we found ourselves alone. The breaking point came a week later. Mark was out for the evening with friends. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence was not empty. It was full of possibility. I was in the kitchen ostensibly cleaning up after dinner when I heard his footsteps behind me. Ere I turned, Liam stood in the doorway, his posture uncertain, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans. "I've been thinking." He began, his voice low and deliberate. "About what you said. About being there for me." He took a step closer, his eyes dark and serious. "I think there's something else I need to talk to you about. Something I haven't been able to figure out on my own." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "Of course, Liam. Whatever it is." He took a deep, shaky breath as if bracing himself. "It's hard to say," he stammered, his gaze dropping to the floor before snapping back to mine, pinning me in place. "But I've been feeling different. Since that night." He swallowed hard. I think I have feelings for you." The words hung in the air so heavy and unexpected they nearly stole my breath. This wasn't what I had prepared for. This was a new, dangerous territory. My mind raced, searching for the right words. The responsible words. The words of a stepmother. I should have shut it down. I should have explained the complexities, the impossibility of it. But as I looked into his eyes, I didn't see a boy with an inappropriate crush. I saw the raw honesty of his confession, the desperate need for connection. And I saw my own reflection in his vulnerability, the loneliness, the yearning for something more than the comfortable, sterile life I shared with his father. I remembered the feeling of power in the bathroom, the thrill of being the one he needed. A voice of reason, faint and distant, screamed at me to stop. But another voice, a dark and seductive whisper, asked why? The silence stretched thick with unspoken desire. I saw the fear in his eyes, the anticipation of rejection. And in that moment a decision was made. Not in my head, but somewhere deeper, in a place ruled by impulse and a long dormant hunger. I closed the distance between us. "Logan," I began, my voice a tremor, intending to say something safe, something sensible. But the words died on my lips. Instead, I raised my hands, my fingers tangling in the soft hair at the nape of his neck, and pulled him down to me. The kiss was not gentle or hesitant. It was a detonation. A dam of pent-up tension and forbidden longing breaking all at once. It was a raw, desperate collision. A surrender to the gravity that had been pulling us together since that night in the bathroom. When we finally broke apart, breathless and shaking, he just stared at me. He started, unable to finish. "I know," I whispered. And then I led him downstairs, my hand in his, a silent acknowledgement that we had just stepped off a cliff together. There was no going back. What happened next was a blur of fevered logic and desperate discovery. It was the fulfillment of a desire I hadn't even allowed myself to name until the moment it was upon me. Afterward, we lay in the darkness, the silence no longer tense, but thick with the weight of our shared secret. "Thank you," he murmured into the quiet, his voice filled with a profound, exhausted relief. I needed that. My heart ached with a terrible, beautiful cocktail of emotions. "You don't have to figure everything out at once," I whispered, stroking his hair. "You're not alone in this." He eventually went back to his room, leaving me alone in the dark. A fragile peace had settled over him, but a storm had just been unleashed within me. I knew this moment was a fracture, a clean break from the life I knew before. It was a point of no return, a secret that would now bind us together, for better or for worse. I had set out to help him navigate the confusing path to manhood, but somewhere along the way, I had become utterly lost myself. And the most terrifying part? I had never felt more found. This was only the beginning of a story that spiraled into places I never imagined. If you find yourself captivated by the complexities of the human heart and the choices that define us, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss where this path leads. Now tell me in the comments, what would you have done?